Imagine a world where Cairo and Baghdad were not foreign capitals, but cities of the same country, where an Arab passport could take you from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf without a single checkpoint or border in between. And yet, for over 1,000 years, every attempt at unity has crumbled almost as quickly as it rose. On paper, the Arab world seems destined for unity. One dominant language, a shared faith, and a history of empires that once ruled from Spain to Central Asia. Yet the region today is anything but united. It is splintered into dozens of borders, rival governments, and alliances that rarely endure. For over 1,000 years, movements have risen to unite Arabs under one banner, whether caliphates, federations, or modern republics, and just as quickly, they have collapsed. The question is simple. If unity seems so natural, why did it never last? By the end of this video, we will uncover why leaders both inside and outside the Arab world feared unity so much, and why the dream, despite constant failure, refuses to die. Before we dive in, if you love curious detours through history's big what-ifs, consider subscribing to Armchair Archaeology. It helps more thoughtful viewers find these stories, and it keeps this little expedition going.
The story of Arab unity begins in the 7th century, in the wake of the Prophet Muhammad's death. Within just a few decades, the Rashidun caliphs had not only consolidated Arabia, but expanded far beyond it. Armies carrying both the new faith and the Arabic language surged out of the peninsula, defeating two ancient superpowers, the Byzantine and Sasanian empires. This was no small achievement. For centuries, the Arab tribes had been seen as outsiders on the fringes of civilization, often recruited as mercenaries by their more powerful neighbors. Suddenly, they were the conquerors. Within a single generation, Arab rule extended from Egypt to Persia, a transformation so rapid that some historians argue it was the fastest geopolitical revolution in world history. When the Umayyads took over, the vision of unity seemed unstoppable. Damascus became the beating heart of an empire that stretched from Spain to the Indus River. Arabic was established as the official language of government, weaving together cultures and regions that had never before shared a common administrative system. Coins, laws, architecture, even postal networks were standardized across a territory larger than Rome at its peak. But even as these systems bound millions together, the same tribal loyalties and resentments that had once divided Arabia lingered beneath the surface. The very idea of Arab unity was no longer just a dream, but a political reality that millions of people lived under. Unity at this scale, however, carried its own problems. Non-Arab Muslims resented second-class status. Distant provinces questioned Damascus's authority. Tribal loyalties, never fully erased, simmered beneath the surface. So while the early caliphates gave the Arab world its most spectacular moment of cohesion, the seeds of fragmentation were already being sown. The Rashidun and Umayyads proved Arab unity was possible, but also precarious. What looked like an empire destined to endure forever would soon start splintering, and the cycle of unity and division would repeat again and again.
If the Umayyads represented the political height of Arab unity, the Abbasids marked its cultural flowering. When the Abbasid family seized power in 750, they shifted the capital eastward to Baghdad, signaling that the empire would now look not only west toward the Mediterranean, but also east toward Persia and beyond. This shift diluted the idea of purely Arab rule, yet it gave rise to something extraordinary. Baghdad became the intellectual crossroads of the medieval world. Scholars gathered from every corner of the empire, translating Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, and Persian science into Arabic. Libraries like the famed House of Wisdom held tens of thousands of manuscripts at a time when most of Europe's cities had only a handful. Arabic became the language of science, philosophy, and medicine across continents. Even centuries later, European scholars would study Avicenna's Canon of Medicine and Al-Khwarizmi's work on algebra. This is the first time we see cultural unity outliving political unity. The cultural brilliance, however, masked a deeper political unraveling. Local dynasties in North Africa and Persia carved out independence. Provincial governors wielded more power than the caliph in Baghdad. The empire that had once stretched seamlessly from Spain to Central Asia began to splinter into semi-autonomous regions, each loyal in name but not in practice. This is the paradox of the Abbasid age. Politically, the Arab world was breaking apart, yet intellectually and culturally, it was knitting together more tightly than ever. The shared Arabic language created a common world of books, debates, and ideas that crossed political boundaries. So even as Arab unity faded on the battlefield, it lived on in the classroom, the library, and the marketplace. The Abbasids remind us that unity is not only about borders and armies. Sometimes it is about ideas powerful enough to outlast kingdoms. As Baghdad's scholars stitch the world's ideas into Arabic, I like to imagine them pausing for a quiet cup while a new thought clicked into place. If you'd like a small ritual for your own thinking time, we designed the Ancient Secrets mug, Armchair Archaeology edition. You'll find it linked in the pinned comment.
By the 16th century, much of the Arab world had fallen under a new banner, but it was not Arab at all. The Ottomans, a rising Turkish dynasty from Anatolia, swept through the Middle East and North Africa, toppling the Mamluks in Egypt and pushing deep into Arabia. For the next 4 centuries, most Arab lands would be ruled not by Arabs, but by Istanbul. At first glance, this looked like unity reborn. The Ottomans created stability, safeguarded pilgrimage routes, and folded the Arab provinces into one vast imperial system. Arabic cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad thrived as commercial hubs under Ottoman protection. The holy cities of Mecca and Medina were managed directly by the Sultan, who styled himself not just emperor, but also caliph, claiming to be the protector of all Muslims. The appearance of unity, however, masked a fragile reality. The empire's administrative heart was Turkish, not Arab. Provincial governors and janissaries often acted with little regard for local populations. Over time, Arab elites chafed under what felt like foreign domination. Regional identities deepened, especially as some provinces, such as the Gulf or North Africa, were governed more loosely and saw themselves drifting further from Istanbul's reach. The Ottomans did provide centuries of shared rule, but it was not the kind of Arab unity nationalists later dreamed about. It was unity imposed from the outside, one that carried the seeds of future discontent. When the empire weakened in the 19th and early 20th centuries, European power stepped in to carve up Arab provinces, often with little resistance from local leaders tired of Ottoman oversight. This kind of unity looks solid, but it belonged to Istanbul, not to the Arab capitals themselves. The Ottoman centuries remind us that unity under foreign rule can hold borders together, but it rarely builds the shared identity needed to make that unity endure.
Even at the height of the Caliphates, unity was never as solid as it looked on the map. The Arab world was, at its core, a tapestry of tribes, clans, and regional loyalties that did not simply disappear when banners were raised in Damascus or Baghdad. These deep-rooted ties often tore empires apart from within. The very first Islamic civil war, the first fitna in the 7th century, is a reminder of how fragile unity could be. Supporters of Ali and Muawiyah clashed not only over leadership, but over competing visions of what the community should be. The outcome was devastating. The split that created Sunni and Shia Islam, a division that still shapes the region today. This was more than theology. It set a pattern where every succession crisis risked tearing the community apart. What began as a political conflict hardened into a fracture that rippled across more than 1,000 years of history. Later, other dynasties rose by capitalizing on these tensions. The Fatimids in Egypt claimed legitimacy as descendants of the Prophet's family. The Umayyads in Spain established their own rival caliphate, directly challenging Baghdad's authority. Even within single dynasties, succession disputes often spiraled into bloody civil wars that left provinces vulnerable to breakaway rulers. This constant fracturing did not mean people abandoned the dream of unity. It meant that unity itself was always contested. Was it tribal, religious, dynastic, or regional? The answer shifted depending on who claimed power. And because legitimacy was always up for debate, the Arab world developed a political pattern where unity was proclaimed loudly, but rarely lasted long. Civil wars and regional loyalties reveal a key paradox. Arab unity was powerful enough to inspire vast empires, yet fragile enough to collapse under the weight of internal rivalries. And every time it fell apart, the dream of unity became a little more complicated.
Arab unity was never only tested from within. Time and again, outside powers layered themselves over the Arab world, reshaping politics and identity. Long after the Rashidun and Umayyad Caliphates, Persian, Turkish, and even Mongol influences left lasting marks on Arab lands. In the 10th century, the Buyids, a Persian dynasty, dominated Baghdad and reduced the Abbasid caliphs to little more than ceremonial figureheads. A century later, the Seljuks, Turkic rulers from Central Asia, arrived and claimed the role of protectors of Sunni Islam. These powers ruled in the name of religion, but not in the name of Arab identity. For many Arabs, unity was no longer about leading empires, but about adapting to life under foreign stewardship. Then came the cataclysm of 1258. When the Mongols sacked Baghdad, the destruction was so complete that witnesses said the Tigris ran black with ink from drowned manuscripts and red with blood from the slain. This was more than the fall of a city. It marked the symbolic end of Arab political centrality. No longer could Baghdad, or any Arab capital, be taken for granted as the beating heart of a unified empire. If that turn in the story surprised you, and you'd like to help us keep researching episodes like this, you can tap Super Thanks below. It directly supports the deep dives, maps, and archival rabbit holes that make these videos possible. Even after that devastation, new foreign dynasties stepped in. The Mamluks, originally slave soldiers of Turkish and Circassian origin, seized control in Egypt and Syria. Later, the Ottomans would fold nearly the entire Arab world into their empire. Each time, Arabs became part of something vast, but power was held elsewhere. So while Arabs shared language, faith, and culture, the reins of authority often slipped away to outsiders. By the modern era, when new calls for Arab unity arose, the historical memory was not of centuries of uninterrupted self-rule, but of adapting to life under someone else's empire.
By the early 20th century, centuries of Ottoman rule had left the Arab provinces under a single imperial umbrella, even if unity was never truly Arab-led. When the First World War brought the Ottomans down, many Arab leaders believed the moment had finally come for self-determination, and perhaps even a new era of unity. The famous correspondence between Sharif Hussein of Mecca and the British suggested that independence was within reach, promised in exchange for rebellion against Istanbul. What the Arabs did not know was that, behind the scenes, Britain and France were already dividing up the region. The secret Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 sketched lines across the map, carving spheres of influence with little regard for history or identity. One French diplomat reportedly drew the boundary between Syria and Lebanon with a pen stroke across a map laid over his dinner table. That single pen stroke did more to define modern Arab borders than centuries of shared history. After the war, promises of independence dissolved into mandates. France took Syria and Lebanon, while Britain claimed Iraq, Transjordan, and Palestine. The Arabian Peninsula remained fragmented into separate kingdoms and emirates, each under varying degrees of colonial pressure. These artificial borders not only split historic communities, but also locked rival elites into new political structures that encouraged competition rather than cooperation. The consequences were profound. What might have been a chance for Arabs to negotiate their own future turned instead into a patchwork of states, each dependent on European powers for survival. The dream of unity became entangled with resentment as colonial administrators reinforced divisions, privileged certain groups, and suppressed pan-Arab aspirations. The colonial legacy explains why, when modern Arab states finally emerged, they did so already divided. Borders fixed by outsiders and loyalties shaped by mandates left mistrust baked into the very foundation of the region's political order, and those divisions still shape the map today. In the decades after independence, the colonial borders remained, but a new idea electrified the region: Pan-Arabism. The vision was simple yet bold. The Arab world, divided into dozens of states, would unite into a single political community once again. This was not just nostalgia for caliphates, but a modern call for solidarity, independence, and dignity in a world dominated by Western and Soviet powers. No figure embodied this dream more than Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. Charismatic and defiant, Nasser championed Arab unity from the 1950s onward. His speeches, broadcast by radio, crackled across borders, stirring crowds from Morocco to Iraq. For many, the sound of his voice was proof that unity could be real. But this promise came with a warning. If unity succeeded under Nasser, it could upend the balance of power across the entire region. New institutions like the Arab League gave a framework to the idea, while movements such as the Ba'ath Party in Syria and Iraq called for the creation of one Arab nation with an eternal mission. Yet, Pan-Arabism ran into the same obstacles that had undone earlier attempts. Rivalries between leaders turned brotherhood into suspicion. Monarchies such as Jordan and Saudi Arabia distrusted revolutionary republics like Egypt and Syria. Economic gaps widened the divide between oil-rich states and poorer ones. And during the Cold War, Arab unity became a card for outside powers to play, but rarely to support. Still, for a generation, Pan-Arabism gave millions hope that unity could be revived in a modern form. It connected the past glories of the Caliphates with the struggles of anti-colonial independence. Even if its political projects faltered, it gave the Arab world a new language of solidarity that still echoes in political speeches and popular culture today. Pan-Arabism showed that unity was not just about borders on a map. It was also about rallying people around a shared sense of destiny, one that leaders promised but could never fully deliver. I'm really curious where you land on this. Was the United Arab Republic doomed by structure, by personalities, or by outside pressure? Drop your take in the comments, and if you've got a favorite near miss in history, share that too.
If Pan-Arabism was the dream, the United Arab Republic was its boldest attempt to turn rhetoric into reality. In 1958, Egypt and Syria merged into a single state under the leadership of Gamal Abdel Nasser. For the first time in centuries, two independent Arab countries agreed to erase their borders and act as one. The move sent shockwaves through the region. Some saw it as the first step toward a fully united Arab world. Others, especially rival monarchies, viewed it as a threat to their survival. At first, enthusiasm was overwhelming. Egyptian and Syrian flags were combined, and new symbols of unity filled the streets. For ordinary people, it felt as though history was turning a corner, reviving the promise of an Arab superstate. Yet behind the pageantry, problems emerged almost immediately. The Egyptian government dominated the union, and many Syrians felt their country had been reduced to a junior partner. Policies that worked in Cairo did not translate easily to Damascus. The union lasted barely 3 years. In less than 1,000 days, the boldest experiment in Arab unity became its starkest lesson. Borders can be erased overnight, but mistrust returns just as fast. In 1961, Syrian officers staged a coup and declared withdrawal from the experiment. Nasser refused to recognize the break at first, but the dream was over. The United Arab Republic became a cautionary tale. Unity was possible on paper, but in practice, it was fragile, vulnerable to suspicion and competing interests. The failure of the UAR left a deep mark. It showed that even when leaders tried to merge states voluntarily, The weight of local politics, pride, and mistrust could undo the project almost overnight. Yet its very existence kept the idea of unity alive. For decades afterward, leaders would invoke the UAR as proof that unity was not a fantasy, only a goal that had yet to find the right formula.
Even when Arab states fractured politically, a sense of cultural unity never disappeared. Shared language, religion, and traditions created bonds that no set of borders could fully erase. Across the region, Arabic remained not only a spoken language, but a vehicle for poetry, theology, and philosophy that connected people from Morocco to Iraq. Literature is one of the clearest examples. In the 20th century, novels by writers such as Naguib Mahfouz in Egypt or Tayeb Saleh in Sudan were read and celebrated in Beirut, Damascus, and beyond. Newspapers circulated across countries, and later, radio and television spread cultural products that transcended national frontiers. Music had the same effect. The voice of Kulthum, Egypt's most famous singer, could stop traffic in Cairo on broadcast nights, but her songs were just as beloved in Baghdad and Tunis. Religion also helped sustain the shared identity. The Quran provided a common text studied and recited in every Arab country, while annual pilgrimages to Mecca brought together believers from across the region. Festivals, traditions, and family customs often looked remarkably similar whether one stood in Aleppo, Khartoum, or Casablanca. This cultural cohesion did not prevent political fragmentation, but it softened the edges of division. Even when states quarreled or borders hardened, Arabs continued to recognize themselves in each other's stories, songs, and rituals. The sense of belonging to a wider community persisted beneath the flags of individual nations. The contrast between cultural unity and political disunity reveals an important truth. Arab unity was never entirely about governments or armies. It also lived in the shared experiences of everyday life, in a common language, in faith, and in the arts that moved people across thousands of miles. In many ways, culture achieved what politics could not. It made the Arab world feel like a single community, even when it was ruled as many.
The struggle for Arab unity often invites comparison with Europe. In the 19th century, Germany and Italy both managed to unify despite being divided into dozens of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states. To many observers, the contrast is striking. If Europe could forge nations out of fragments, why did the Arab world remain divided into separate states? 3 things Europe had that the Arab world did not: industrial glue, a leading power to drive unification, and external pressure to consolidate. The conditions in Europe were dramatically different. Industrialization was binding regions together through railroads, trade, and factories. Economic momentum created a material foundation for political unity. At the same time, powerful states like Prussia in Germany and Piedmont in Italy acted as engines of consolidation, using armies, bureaucracies, and diplomacy to absorb their neighbors. Leadership mattered as well. Otto von Bismarck balanced war and negotiation with ruthless skill, while Giuseppe Garibaldi embodied the romantic vision of Italian nationalism, rallying volunteers and shaping popular enthusiasm. The Arab world lacked similar anchors. No single state combined the military might, economic weight, and political legitimacy needed to lead. Egypt under Nasser tried, but it faced resistance from monarchies in Jordan and Saudi Arabia, suspicion from Iraq and Syria, and mistrust from wealthy Gulf rulers. Oil created prosperity, yet it also reinforced divisions between rich and poor states. Ideological competition between socialism, nationalism, and Islamism further split societies. External pressure added another obstacle. European empires had already drawn arbitrary borders across the region, and later the United States and Soviet Union treated the Middle East as a Cold War chessboard. A unified Arab state would have threatened global interests in oil and strategy, so unity was discouraged rather than supported. The comparison highlights a crucial lesson. Shared culture and language are not enough to build a nation. Successful unifications require power centers, strong institutions, and leaders able to overcome both internal rivalries and outside interference. Europe had those advantages. The Arab world, constrained by history and circumstance, did not.
We began with a question. If the Arab world shares a common language, a common faith, and a history of empire, why has unity always slipped away? Along the way, we saw unity achieved in dazzling bursts. The Rashidun and Umayyads expanded at lightning speed. The Abbasids created a shared culture of knowledge. The Ottomans held Arab lands under one umbrella. And Nasser's Pan-Arabism stirred millions with the promise of a new dawn. Each moment carried the seeds of both possibility and collapse. And now, the twist we promised at the start. The reasons for failure were many. Tribal loyalties, dynastic rivalries, economic divides, and relentless foreign intervention. Yet here's the revelation we set out to uncover. Arab unity was not always defeated by weakness. At times, it was feared and even sabotaged, both by leaders within the Arab world and by powers beyond it. Monarchs resisted unity because it threatened their thrones. Foreign governments discouraged it because a single Arab superstate would have upended global control over oil and strategy. Unity was dangerous precisely because it was possible. And still, the dream never disappeared. It lived on in novels and music, in shared traditions, and in the voices of leaders who promised a single Arab future. Today, the borders remain, but the cultural bonds are unmistakable. People in Cairo, Baghdad, Beirut, and Rabat may carry different passports, yet they still recognize one another in language, faith, and heritage. So, is Arab unity a myth or a dream waiting for its moment? History shows it has always been fragile, often sabotaged, sometimes feared. Yet it also shows that the longing for unity has never truly died. That may be the most remarkable fact of all. The dream endures, even when politics fail. And now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Arab unity was ever truly possible, or was it always more of an idea than a reality? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, give the video a like, subscribe to Armchair Archaeology, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep questioning, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most powerful borders are the ones drawn in people's minds.